Hello and welcome to day 49. We are working our way through the book of Numbers now, and we are almost done with the book of Acts. So we'll be looking at Numbers chapters 3 and 4 and Acts chapter 25 today. Numbers, once again, we're counting people, thus the name Numbers in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. This chapter, we are counting the Levites. This is the tribe of Levi, who was one of the sons of Jacob. And these are the people that have been set aside by God to serve the people of Israel and to serve God in the tent of dwelling, in the tabernacle, the movable place where the people of Israel gathered to worship God and for God to have his presence in their midst. Now, they're talking about firstborns here. And one thing I want to mention here is that some of the other religious traditions in this area of the world had a tradition of human sacrifice where the firstborns would be sacrificed, both animals and children, to the God. And our God definitely did not like this practice. And so, starting with the last plague, the death of the firstborns in Egypt just before the Israelites left across the Red Sea, God has been setting aside the firstborns in a different way. In this case, they're set aside to serve as priests, or the people are giving some money as they offer through an offering, not a sacrifice. They are setting aside their firstborns as having a special relationship with God. After the counting of the Levite priests, then there is a listing of a whole bunch of the duties in the tabernacle. There are different tasks for different groups of people. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, what are the things in my life that I set aside for God? What time do I set aside for God, and what money and what other resources do I have that I set aside? For us today, it may not look the same as paying a special offering for the firstborn children. It may not look like giving one of our children to work in the temple, or in the Middle Ages, they were sent to monasteries and abbeys. But there are still ways that we can make a commitment. Maybe we have a regular recurring donation that goes out from our bank account to a church or to a nonprofit to do God's work in our community. Maybe we set aside some time each week, each month to volunteer and to help neighbors. But I think we can be inspired by this section, even though it seems very different from our lives. We can be inspired to figure out what part of our resources of time and money we're going to set aside for God. In Acts, we're continuing with this long drawn out story of what happens to Paul after all of these Jewish religious leaders in so many communities have gotten so upset with his teaching about the way of Jesus. In our reading today, we have Festus, who is a new Roman leader that's been assigned to this area, and he takes on Paul's case because Felix never resolved it. In the process, Paul appeals to Caesar, which means as a Roman citizen, he has the right to go to Rome and have his case heard. And in the process, Festus could not find any crime, because in sending Paul on to Rome, he needs to send a document as to what this guy's crime is and what needs to be resolved. So Festus works with King Agrippa to try to document something for Rome. And my thoughts as I was going through here is, what are the ways that we escalate conflicts and disagreements in our lives? Are we peacemakers? Are we trying to find ways to de-escalate situations, or do we keep piling things on? Do we ever try to put something together to undermine someone else, which is clearly what the Jewish leaders were doing here with Paul? I think the main thing for all of us to think about in our daily lives and our relationships with the people we live with and work with is that we need to stay focused on Jesus and Jesus' teachings, just like Paul did. Paul knew the way of Jesus. Paul personally had had an experience with Jesus. Paul spent time with Jesus. And in the end, it really comes down to what Micah was saying: to love others, to live with justice and mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And I think that is wisdom for the ages from both Paul and the prophet Micah. Have a super day. We'll see you next time.